All right, we are back, and we were just thinking about like it's coming up, it's coming soon. So we got this episode and Thursday, and then Tuesday, and then we'll when from then on we'll be checking in as we're writing. So some of the stuff that was been coming to my mind is like I want to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit and show folks kind of what my outline process looks like and another tool that I use. And then Adrian, I think you're going to talk a little bit about using Scrivener and some of its strengths for the kind of the pre-writing process and the research process. Um, but before we get into that, I don't know, for whatever reason, I got up this morning. I was like, I was just like thinking about folks if they're first starting out on this kind of thing and like what would I want to know, you know, starting out. And so we both kind of back and forth just briefly kind of came up with a couple of things. I'll share mine, and then Adrian, if you have some, share yours too. And you're welcome to comment on anything that I say, because some of these things you probably have thoughts on too. The first off that I thought about is that, and one of the reasons I think NaNoWriMo would be good for people is writers groups are awesome, you know. Um, that was how we met, doing a writers group. Both of us were pretty introverted, but fortunately, we knew another writer who was like super extroverted, and he kind of just was good at bringing people together. So if Jeff ever listens into this, thank you, Jeff, for doing that. But I think about folks who kind of cycle through that writers group and other writer groups I've been in. There came a point at some point where I kind of stepped away from being in writers groups, but when I was starting out, I really appreciated what other people were thinking, and it forced me to think critically about my own work more and to have some feedback and stuff. Um, the other thing I thought about is I think it's important to read your work aloud, um, to read back over what you've written and to hear what the voice sounds like and what your voice sounds like, and you'll catch grammar errors and stuff like that, but I think it is really important to read it out loud and to be listening to what the words are doing. Um, I someone told me at some point in time to avoid another thing that I think is important is avoiding adverbs, especially when you're starting out, like avoid adverbs and try to use strong verbs instead. Um, back up your work. That's a big one. I wish someone had told me that at some point in time to back up your work, keep and now it's kind of like you don't have an excuse because like I remember being worried I would back up my work to like floppy disks back in the day, and I was like worried that if there was a fire in my apartment that I would just like lose everything, you know? But now it's like I don't even know how you would access that work on a floppy disk. So now we've just got the cloud, so no one has an excuse. We may live to regret having everything backed up to the cloud. I don't know, but um and the last two things I thought about was like closely observe the world, you know, nature, art, culture, but also other people and your interactions with them. And then the final thing I thought about was like know your rights. I'm going to put a link down below to a book that I felt like was really helpful for me just to understand what copyright is and how copyright works um and to just know really how to represent myself in terms of when you start to do it professionally, what you need to know to do it professionally. That came a lot later, but it was important. Um, those are things that I would want kind of everyone to consider if they're starting out in this. Adrian, have you thought about things like that?
Um, yeah, I have a handful, I guess. I would say first and foremost, like have fun and enjoy what you're doing. Like if it goes nowhere and no one else cares and it never comes to anything, then you should at least be able to say I enjoyed doing it and I had
Yeah.
fun. This is not a good kind of strategy as a like get rich quick scheme.
No, we
So
both
if you're not enjoying what you're doing, then you're going to be like quadruply screwed by the end. You should at
It's
least enjoy what you're doing.
it's funny, but I've met folks like when they're just starting out who like they think that this might work as a way to make money, and I'm just kind of like, where did you get that idea? Like, is that from movies? Like, where? I don't know. Have you met
Well,
folks
people
like
need money
that?
sometimes.
People do. I mean, there are,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
those.
tons. Most, yes. Tons, especially when I've like taught creative writing workshops and stuff.
Mm,
You would be taken aback
hmm
by how many people don't even read
Right.
that think that they're just going to like write novels and make a living off that. And they don't even like reading.
Hmm.
I don't know what goes through people's minds, but
Observe
so
them
yeah, I
closely.
think my
Yeah.
first thing would be write things that you enjoy writing, because that
Mm,
might be the only thing that happens is that
mm,
you enjoy doing it. And that will, if you're like me, that will justify it quite a bit.
yeah.
Not completely, but quite a bit. Um, Another thing that I would say is like look like try to have a, as best you can, especially starting out, try to have a quick turnaround for feedback.
Mm,
The long, like it's a long, lonely process to write a book. You do it in solitude quite a bit. It's probably the loneliest art form that there is. There might be a lonelier one, but I don't know of it. um, so a thing that you can do is kind of seek feedback, like have readers and seek feedback, to try to shorten the feedback loop so that you're kind of getting feedback and then you can incorporate that feedback into what you're doing. The kind of quicker turnaround for that you can get, the better. um, I think that has a shelf life. I think as you kind of learn what, like by the time you know what you're doing, then I think that has diminishing returns.
mm.
um, but for starting out, I think it's really big. um,
Can I say one point on
Another
that?
thing that I would say is,
Can I
yeah,
say one point on that real quick? Just because some people might not know what I mean by a writers
yeah,
group, but I feel like that point is talking to it. Um,
sure,
in the writers group, the way that we did it is we had maybe 3 or 4 people, um, and some of us were writing fiction, some of us were writing nonfiction, some of us were writing poetry, but you basically got into a rotation. And like this week, I might be bringing something, so I would have to say we meet on a Wednesday evening. I would need to bring it to that Wednesday evening meeting, and everyone would need to read it prior to the next Wednesday and make their notes, and we would sit around and talk about it. And then if you were going next, you would have brought your next thing to that Wednesday meeting where they were talking about my stuff. And then the following week, we'd be talking about your stuff. We would have a week to read over it and to provide feedback. And that, I think that was a really good system, you know? Um,
yeah. I didn't really think of this as one of the things, but I think to add it on though, that is just like join a writer's workshop.
mm,
um, Especially for a new writer, I think that is a like can't lose thing.
mm,
You'll, I mean, some writers groups are definitely better than others, but you'll learn something from belonging to one for sure.
mm,
um I would also say, and you kind of talked about this, like reading out loud, especially dialogue.
mm,
Read dialogue out loud so that you can hear if it actually sounds, you can, it's amazing what you can kind of just write and think about in your head And then when you have to like stand up in front of somebody and read it, you just cringe at it. Um, so anything, all your work, probably like read out loud, so that you can hear, because you'll hear like when you're going on too long or something's getting boring or um, language is kind of flat and lazy and you could come up with more active language, you can hear that really well when you actually read it out loud to yourself.
Mm.
But especially dialogue, you hear the voices of characters and stuff. um, Even if you're only reading it out loud to yourself, that's a really good thing to do.
Yeah.
I would say also finish things. Like even if you need to kind of start with with shorter pieces and write short stories, I can't tell you how important it is to like for the feel of what the full arc of a story feels like. You can't, there's no way to fake it. You have to just
Mhm.
finish things. You have to write the beginning, the middle, and the end over and over and over and over again to get a feel for the full arc of how to tell a story. Um, and I think especially young writers and new writers, they start things a lot and then they peter out on them and don't finish them. They get really good at starting things and they're still at step one when it comes to later steps of the narrative process. And so
Mm.
even if you're kind of done with something, finish it. Even if you just have to kind of like wrap it up and it's kind of a half-assed ending, bring it to a conclusion, bring it to an ending, finish it, get
Mm.
experience finishing things.
Mm.
Um, those are kind of my big things. How many was that? Is that five?
Those are really
Four?
solid. I think that was four, but they
Yeah.
were all really solid. Um, I like what you're saying about finishing things. Yeah, I think that is really important. I've never thought about that, but yeah, it's even if you start really small, it'd be better to write one thing that's really short and you finish it than try to write something really big and you get 20 pages in and you don't know where to go next. Um, you're gonna learn more writing that short thing. Yeah. What would you think about I'm curious because I haven't really played this game in a long time, but do you think it's because when we first started out, it seems like it was like really important to get your work published in like literary journals. Um, do you still feel like that's an important thing?
I think it depends on what your goals are.
Hmm.
I think if you want to kind of get into academia and
Yeah,
go that route, then yes, it is. Um,
yeah,
if what you want to do is tell stories, then I think it is less important now than it has ever been.
I agree. I think it's like if you want to get an MFA, maybe try to work on publication in literary journals or something. But I can also think about ways that literary journal publishing has held me back um and it's kind of a cutthroat process and there's a lot of honestly there's it's not back in the 50s 60s 70s there was some amazing stuff that was being published in literary journals and now it's just a lot of it's just become most literary journals are under the control or whatever of a university and it's these university types that they're not real risk takers in terms of what they're going to publish you know um I don't know.
Yeah, my feeling about it is that somewhere along the line it stopped being about the kind of creation and the discovery of exciting new up and coming literature, and it became just a way to pad a resume to get tenure.
Yeah, I
And
would say it
that
was
is kind of what
briefly
its
after
function
Raymond
has
Carver.
become.
Yeah, I think sometime around the Raymond Carver, Richard Ford time of literary journals is when the whole thing just kind of died. It was like they invented those kinds of stories, and now that's all that gets published is those types of literary naturalistic stories, which they're great. They're good stories when they're well written, but I don't know. Um, well, so I want to take just a second to show you kind of what I've been working on for the last little bit. I did switch. We talked about this kind of off the camera, but I had kind of a crisis moment last week, and I was like, I don't know if I want to write the lit RPG story right now. I want to write something else, which is one of the reasons why we outline is to figure out. And I still am really interested in that story. I don't know. I guess I became more interested in this other story. So, but I wanted people to kind of see my outlines are. This outline is probably the most intense outline I've ever done. I'm literally outlining paragraph by paragraph. And there's moments where I'm giving, if there's like embedded stuff like this, it's additional research that I've done. Um, but I know what I need to be doing in each paragraph with this outline. There's advantages and disadvantages to outlining that way. But, and I've actually never outlined to that degree of granularity. Um, but it's felt good to outline. I feel comfortable outlining this one that way. Um, and honestly, it will help me if I'm trying to get 2,000 words a day. I felt like this is what I needed to do to get that.
Yeah, and in terms of just kind of like preparation to try to write 50,000 words of a novel in 30 days, I think that's a really good strategy
Yeah,
because you don't have to a lot of the kind of like sitting there trying to think of what happens next that happens, you have already done that. You're just
yeah,
going to
and
the next item on your checklist and filling that out into a paragraph
yeah,
that
yeah.
you're setting yourself up for success.
It's literally what I want to do. The thing is so I want to show you all this. I have not been working on that long. Um, this shows you exactly what I've done so far. Um, and this is just word counts. So I had my crisis moment around 10:19. I think that's an exact date. I'm not sure, but I'm estimating I did 1,400 words on this outline that day, and then 1,100 the next day. And then I was busy doing some other stuff. I take Sundays off, but the Sunday number is a total, and I repeat the total out here. And then yesterday I got 530 words, and today I did. If I do it in the morning, that's 172 words in the morning, and then afternoon or evening it was 213. So normally my mornings are busier times than my evenings, but today I worked at the hospital, so that's what happened. And then so this is this week's total down here. I stole this little thing from this method of kind of keeping track of word counts from from Brandon Sanderson. Is that his name? I can never remember his name. But
Yeah.
I remember him talking about it on YouTube, and I was just like, yeah, I want to do that. I like checking off the box, so it has become a motivator for me. The trick with it is right now I'm indicating word count for outline just to motivate me to do outlining, but I it's very likely I will be continuing to outline even as we're writing, and that I will not count word count for the outline during that. I will only count writing in November. So I may keep a separate
I would count them
tabulation.
both. I would
Nah,
count
I
them
think
both.
I really want to hold myself. I'll count them both, but I'll count them separately, so that it's clear. Like this is the amount of novel that I did. This is the amount of outline I did. I do think it's helpful for me to keep the outline alive document. So I could show you other outlines that I've got that are much messier. But it's like they're completed projects, and so the project is completed, but the outline's a total disaster area. Um, and it's because the project's completed and I trashed the outline in the process of making the project. So the outlines, I'm not like married to it. It is like a boneyard. It gradually becomes a boneyard, where I'm holding kind of those things that didn't make it in, or stuff that needs to happen in revision. You mentioned you have a different way of outlining, so I want you to talk a little bit about that.
Well, I don't really have a way of outlining. I do it different every time. I'm still kind of searching for my right way of outlining. I mean, I finished things doing things a couple different ways, but in the kind of like decomposing phase at the end where you think back about like what worked well, what didn't work so well, like I've never I've never had anything in terms of like the outlining and that kind of systematic preparation or kind of big picture skeleton that I was like, that worked really well, and I'm going to do that again. You
Yeah.
know, every
Yeah,
time I
exactly.
try it a different way. Um, but for this project, I'm trying the Stephen Pressfield foolscap method. And so he has, it's basically an outline that fits on a single sheet of paper. It's a 1-page outline. And then you just kind of connect the dots in between. And it's so I'm outlining some of those in between things. I'm still doing them longhand on a piece of like foolscap paper. I'm gonna load those up into Scrivener. And when I do that, then if you want, I'll do a screen share and we can like look at that when I do it. But right now it's all just on a sheet of foolscap. I mean, that'll be the last thing I do before it's actually like go time, is type it all up in Scrivener, like ready to go, you know. Right now it's all just kind of in a notebook. But it's like an inciting incident, a middle build, and a like climax.
Yeah.
And then you take that and you cut that in half. So there needs to be kind of a turning point in between the inciting incident and the midpoint. There's going to be a turning point in between. So then that's the next thing that you flesh out. And there's going to be a kind of like after the midpoint, a point where kind of all the pieces come together and the thing that must be done is clear. There's a kind of revelation point where we see kind of how the end of the story needs to unfold. Like the protagonist sees like what it is they need to do to put all this together. That's kind of the 3/4 point. And so it's just kind of taking basically the middle of each step and just adding another point in between to fill it out.
That's a great method.
And I've got 3 kind of plot lines going on, and each one like a 5-point a 5-step outline. And then it's the kind of interconnection, like they all kind of converge at the end, but they start separate. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I would like to see that. And I think it would be good too, like as we're wrapping up tonight, particularly, I mean, one of the reasons I'm doing NaNoWriMo this year is to get a discount on Scrivener. I had Scrivener in the past. I was kind of intimidated by it. I feel like now there's even more videos and stuff out there to educate folks on how to use Scrivener. And Scrivener also can be used for screenplay writing. Like it's a very robust word processing program.
Yes,
Also
it has templates for screenwriting, actually.
Yeah.
I'm a
Yeah.
fan of it. There's still things that I don't like about it, but it's pretty user friendly. Like I do this this kind of first draft part I like to do in Scrivener. And then as
Yeah.
I get more towards the kind of polishing side of things, I move it into Word because that is still a lot more just practical and easy to do in Word.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a point where I kind of abandon Scrivener and I export my document to Word, and then I do the rest of the work in Word.
That's interesting because I think Scrivener is gonna kind of win the game when it comes to like particularly publishing with Amazon, because Scrivener, you don't have to use the Kindle extensions for exporting to Kindle or to, I mean, so that's pretty nice, right?
It's actually one of the things that I don't like about Scrivener.
Interesting. Well, I want
It's
we'll have
like
a
it
whole
is
episode
that
on
way, but
Scrivener.
it's so
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Well,
Let's have a whole
I'm not a
episode
Scrivener expert.
yeah. I'm not an expert on either. I still use Word for a lot of professional stuff because I use for my professional writing, I use a lot of references and citations, and I need a citation manager, which I don't know how Scrivener works with citation managers, but Microsoft Word works really good with citation managers. And it's kind of standard practice for a lot of editing. Like almost every editor that I work with wants to do edits in Word. Um, and yeah, and there's a lot of reasons for that. So, but we'll talk about that maybe some other time. I think that's it for
Sure.
tonight. Um, Tomorrow, Thursday, let's look into my little crystal ball. Um, do we want to talk about like Joseph Campbell or plot or something like that? Um,
Yeah, we can't. I feel like we had in the little kind of thing that you sent me, we had like three parts of
yeah, we talked
outlining and
about the
plotting that
outline.
we kind of wanted to,
Yeah,
and I think that's good to kind of break it up that way and spend a little bit of time on each kind of section of it.
mm.
Um,
Well,
but
let's
I'm down for whatever.
tell you what, let's talk about in-game. I think in games are really important. I think people
Okay.
spend a lot of time talking
Sure.
about beginnings and middles and settings and characters, and you can find plenty of stuff out there about settings and characters and stuff, and those are important things. But in game is one of those things that seldom gets
Yeah. So
addressed.
research.
Yeah,
Sorry. Research, end game, um, enneagram and plot. If you want to
yeah,
talk about that, sequence and rhythm, setting.
yeah. I saw that.
Um,
I think I think a lot of that stuff can be rolled into a discussion of in game. Um, and I think it's something to, especially as we're kind of gearing up for next week. I want to have a solid end game in mind. So, and I don't really have my end game
yeah,
in place yet.
and
Yeah.
there are really practical reasons for that. Like when you get bogged down in the swamp, if you know your end game,
Mhm.
then you have something to drive towards.
Yeah.
Like you may kind of feel like you're in the morass, but if you know where you're headed, then you can just point yourself at that and start taking steps in that direction.
Yeah. Agreed.
And
So
again,
let's,
all of the messiness can get worked out in revision, you know. For now, you just need to get to where you're going.
we'll hold on to that. We'll come back to that next week or next on Thursday. We'll talk about that. Because I love what you're saying already. And so yeah, we'll chat on that next time. All right, man.
Sounds good.
See you then.